It all started on a humid Wednesday afternoon when my son, Alex, moved back in with me after several years away. He had just wrapped up some high-level federal training and was preparing for his next assignment. We live in a peaceful, if slightly overmanaged, gated community where the grass is always trimmed, the mailboxes must be regulation black, and the HOA seems to find new rules to enforce by the week. I'd always played it safe, paid my dues, kept my hedges neat, and waved politely to the neighbors. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened the day Alex came home. He arrived in a plain government-issue black SUV. Not a flashy car by any means, but it clearly had the presence of an official vehicle, heavy, sleek, tinted windows, and a quiet hum that made it seem like it had more power than it let on. As soon as it pulled into my driveway, I saw the curtains twitch across the street. That was Karen's house. Karen is the self-appointed enforcer of the HOA rules, despite only being a board member and not the president. She is the kind of neighbor who times your trash can placement and sends emails about holiday decorations being 2 inches too close to the sidewalk. I'd had run-ins with her before, minor ones, but nothing major. A warning about a planter I had on my porch, a reminder that our garage door had been left open for too long. Always polite, always condescending. As Alex stepped out of the SUV, wearing his dark jeans and a simple gray t-shirt, Karen came marching across the street like she was inspecting a crime scene. Her face was already puckered in disapproval, clipboard in hand. I could see her glance from the vehicle to Alex and back again as though trying to figure out how to categorize the violation. "Excuse me," she said, without even greeting us, "who is this?" I tried to stay calm, even friendly. "Karen, this is my son, Alex. He's just moving in for a while." Karen's eyes narrowed. "We weren't notified of any new permanent residents. HOA guidelines clearly state that all new occupants must be approved and registered, especially adults." Alex, who had just pulled a duffel bag out of the trunk, paused and turned slowly toward her. He gave a small smile, polite but cautious. "He's not a renter," I clarified. "This is his home, too. He grew up here." Karen scribbled something on her clipboard. "That may be, but he'll need to complete the residency application and vehicle registration for the HOA. And large government vehicles are not permitted to park overnight in residential driveways. They must be garaged or stored elsewhere." "It's just temporary," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "He's only here for a short time before his next post." Karen gave me a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Rules are rules. We can't make exceptions. We don't want to lower the standards of the neighborhood." At that moment, Alex stepped forward and opened the passenger door of the SUV. From the glove box, he retrieved a small leather wallet and calmly flipped it open. Inside was his federal identification, the real kind, with a gold eagle seal, embedded chip, holograms, and official stamps. Karen's eyes locked onto it like a deer caught in headlights. "I'm with a federal agency, ma'am," Alex said calmly, professionally. "This vehicle is under federal jurisdiction. I'm temporarily residing with my mother while I await reassignment. There is no cause for concern." For a moment, Karen froze. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She blinked a few times like she was trying to reset her brain. I could practically see the gears grinding in her head as she processed the badge, the ID, and the implications. The clipboard slowly lowered. "Federal agency," she said, her voice a bit shaky. "Now." "Yes," Alex replied, with a calm authority that made even me stand a little straighter. "Everything is documented and legal. I won't be staying long, but while I'm here, I expect privacy and respect. I hope that won't be a problem." Karen took a small step back, her composure visibly slipping. She looked from him to me, then back at the SUV. For a moment, I thought she might faint. "Well, I suppose if it's temporary and official," she muttered. "We just like to keep the community informed." Alex tucked the ID back into his wallet and gave her a cordial nod. "Understood. Thank you for your concern." Without another word, Karen turned and walked, no, scurried, back across the street, her clipboard clutched to her chest like a lifeline. As soon as she disappeared behind her door, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Alex glanced at me, a small grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. That was fun, he said. I'm sure she's already drafting an emergency email to the board, I replied. She'll live. That night, we laughed about it over dinner, but I knew this wasn't the end. Karen didn't back down easily. She'd been embarrassed, publicly, no less, and by someone she couldn't bully or lecture. That kind of thing sticks with people like her. But I also knew that Alex wasn't just any guest. He had training, credentials, and a calm, commanding presence that made it clear he didn't need to prove himself. He didn't have to threaten or posture, just the ID and the tone of his voice were enough to knock Karen off her high horse. It wasn't just the fact that he worked for the federal government that threw her off. It was the way he carried himself, like someone who'd been in rooms Karen could only imagine, dealt with situations she'd never understand. That shook her. The next morning, I noticed something odd. Karen's car, usually parked precisely parallel to the curb, was gone. Later that day, I saw her husband doing the yard work, a first. She didn't resurface for nearly a week. When she did, she didn't mention the SUV. No emails. No warnings. Not even a wave. Apparently, when faced with someone who carries actual authority, not the faux power of an HOA clipboard, Karen finally met her match. Karen had barely recovered from the sight of my son pulling out his federal ID when she stormed off, red-faced and muttering under her breath. I thought that would be the end of it. That maybe, just maybe, she'd finally learned not to pick fights she couldn't win. But if I had learned anything in the 5 years of dealing with Karen as our HOA president, it was that she never gave up easily. Her pride was stitched too tightly into the seams of her sweater sets and clipped into her ever-perfect French twist. The next morning, a bright Saturday, the sun barely peeking over the tops of the houses, Karen was back. She stood in front of our driveway with a clipboard, a manila folder, and what appeared to be a measuring tape. My son, David, who had flown in from DC just 2 days earlier, sipped his coffee from the porch with the calm demeanor of a man who'd faced far more intimidating situations. She's really doing this, I muttered, peeking through the blinds. She brought the tape measure this time. She's determined, David said, not even annoyed, more amused. He had that kind of patience that only came from working in high-pressure environments. Most people would have snapped. He just raised his mug slightly in Karen's direction like he was toasting her nonsense. She noticed, of course. Karen always noticed everything. It was practically her job, or at least she believed it was. Within minutes, she marched up the walkway like she owned the bricks, stopping a few feet away from David. I need to know exactly how long your vehicle will be parked here, she said, not even offering a good morning. You didn't register it with the HOA. David took another slow sip before answering. It's a government-issued vehicle, ma'am. It doesn't need to be registered. Karen blinked. Everything in this neighborhood is subject to HOA policy. He reached for his ID again, but she flinched. I don't need to see that again, she said quickly. I've contacted the board. Now this was new. Karen was the board, at least in her mind. The idea that she felt the need to escalate it beyond herself meant one of two things. She was either rattled or trying to save face. Later that day, I received an email titled Urgent, Unauthorized Resident Investigation Pending. It was from the HOA but CC'd only me and 2 board members who typically kept their heads down. The email read like a legal notice, full of vague terms like unauthorized presence, possible breach of community agreement, and pending action. David read it over my shoulder and chuckled. She's trying to intimidate you, he said. Classic bureaucratic bluff. She's hoping we'll back down. I wanted to ignore it, but David had other plans. If she wants paperwork, he said, we'll give her paperwork. The next morning, he printed out copies of his federal clearance documents, his legal rights under the Fair Housing Act, and, Just for good measure, he brought up the HOA's bylaws and highlighted every section that proved she was out of line. He slid the packet into a sleek black folder and left it on her doorstep with a sticky note, in the interest of transparency. For 3 days, there was silence. Not a peep from Karen. I actually started to think she'd given up, that maybe this time the mountain of bureaucracy David had handed her was too much even for her relentless need to be right. But I should have known better. That Thursday, during the neighborhood walk Karen insisted on doing weekly, she reappeared. This time, she had backup, Greg, one of the more impressionable board members, who mostly followed her lead. They stopped in front of our house, pretending to examine the condition of the sidewalk. Karen scribbled something furiously onto her clipboard, then marched straight to our front door and knocked like she was delivering a subpoena. David answered, casual as ever. Afternoon. We've received complaints, Karen said without even greeting him. From who? David asked. Karen blinked. I'm not at liberty to say. That's convenient, he replied. She continued. There have been reports of loud vehicles, suspicious activity late at night, and unfamiliar visitors. I stepped in then. Karen, are you implying my son is suspicious? She didn't respond directly. The HOA has rules. If your son is going to be living here long term, he needs to be approved. David looked at her, then at Greg, who avoided eye contact entirely. Let me be clear, he said. I'm a federal agent on temporary leave. My job is classified, but I assure you, I've been vetted more thoroughly than anyone on this street. Including you. Karen paled again, and for a moment I thought she might actually faint this time. Greg mumbled something about a meeting and scurried off, leaving Karen alone. She took a breath, steadied herself, and said, I will take this to the county, if necessary. David smiled politely. Go ahead. But you might want to read Section 5C of the bylaws again before you waste the county's time. I highlighted it for you. And with that, he gently shut the door. That night, Karen sent out a community-wide email titled Maintaining Our Standards. It was the usual passive-aggressive nonsense, thinly veiled references to transient visitors, and the importance of neighborhood vigilance. But no names. No direct accusations. Just the kind of message that let her feel in control without having to admit she'd lost the fight. But what she didn't count on was David's popularity. Over the next week, neighbors began stopping by, thanking him for his service. One even brought over a pie. Word had spread, because of course it had, and people were tired of Karen's overreach. One neighbor even said, I always wondered if someone would finally stand up to her. By the end of the month, the HOA board had scheduled an emergency meeting, not to discuss David, but to discuss Karen. Apparently, several residents had submitted formal complaints about harassment, overreach, and abuse of power. The irony was sweet. Karen's power began to unravel, slowly at first. She was removed from her self-appointed role as head of the architectural committee. Her clipboard disappeared. The weekly walk stopped. And as for David, he stayed for a few more weeks, then left to return to duty. But not before hosting a small get-together in our backyard, neighbors, music, a grill going late into the evening. No one complained. In fact, a few even lingered long past sunset. Karen never came. She stayed inside, blinds drawn. And for the first time in years, the neighborhood felt just a little more like home.